what is up and welcome back to my channel. As you guys can tell from the title of today's video, I have finally read another book that I loved enough to sit down and talk to you guys about it. If you guys follow the vlog at all, you will know that I recently finished Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. I'm gonna keep this review pretty short and pretty simple because this is the second volume of a series and I don't really want to spoil things. There are a few characters that do carry over from the first one, which I will briefly touch on, but I really just wanted to break down my experience reading the story and overall what I truly thought of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So Bloody Rose does take place quite a bit in the future, leaving off of Kings of the Wild. There are a few characters, like I said, that do carry over from the first one, and I do like how they're represented, but this one primarily focuses on Tam, who is the daughter of an old merc. Her mother has passed away, she has a wild heart, and her father kind of shelters her from everything, from boys, from life, just anything that may put her in danger. And one day, Tam's uncle, whose name I can never remember for some reason, asked her if she wants to become a bard or wants to essentially try out for the part of the bard in Bloody Rose's group, in Bloody Rose's troupe. So the reason why this is such a big deal is Bloody Rose is actually, or Rose, is actually the daughter of Golden Gabe from the first one. If you have read the first one or know anything about it, the boys get the band back together to essentially save her. So it's really nice to see her a little bit older, to see her relationships with her group as well. Fable is a lot different from what I would say the boys in the band were like. I feel like Fable to me felt more like a family. In the first one, it was a lot of friends and they had like their little jokes and stuff. It was just a bunch of dudes. But the reason why I really liked this one is getting to see things from the bard's perspective. The bard, or Tam, her role is really to just listen and see what happens and not really fight, and to be able to live to tell the story of what happens to everybody else in Fable. And I really liked that because I felt like it was a more realistic approach to what it's actually like being in a band. They go over some struggles, they go over some drug use. There's a character that has a lot of drug use. There's a character who suffers with their identity on who they're really supposed to be. There's a druid in their group, which is really crazy because in the first one, he was kind of the bad guy of the group, and I really liked that they had a druid in this as well. And there is a shaman who's able to kind of transform into a bear, and then there is another girl who's called Kira, and she is an ink witch. And I think of all of them, I would say ink witch is definitely my most favorite thing about this story. Kira is able to basically transform her tattoos into real life beings that are able to fight. So I really liked that. I liked the different perspectives. I liked the different types of fighters in this one as well, because in the first one we had mostly melee kind of fighters, and then we had Moog. Moog was able to do magic, and that was kind of like the only real magic that we got to experience was done from him. In this one, most of the characters can do magic, and I think that's really cool. Now obviously Rose cannot and Tam cannot. They are simply fighters, but everyone else in the group is able to. And I really loved their relationships. You really got to get to know them, and you got to get to know them on a completely realistic kind of level. There's a lot of struggles within the group. There's a lot of, should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? Like, do we need to listen to this person? Does this really need to happen? Like, it was a lot of dialogue just setting up the story within the group, and I really liked that. I liked the relationships, and I liked that the book didn't end on a high note necessarily when it came to every single one of those. Now, that is kind of a qualm that I had with the first one. I feel like it ended really neatly. I feel like it was, which I was totally fine with because I loved all of the characters so much that I was like, I don't want anything to happen to them, but it doesn't necessarily happen like that in this book. There's a lot of death. There's a lot of people that we previously know and loved that do not make it in this one, and I really felt for them. I'm not going to say obviously like who died or anything like that, but I do think it was a bit more brutal. Now, the thing that I really love about this book, aside from the characters, is I wouldn't say the plot is necessarily the most interesting thing to me. I think it's interesting enough that I truly enjoyed it, but I really like the characters and the dialogue and the writing. Nicholas is such a great writer. I cannot stress that enough. I think that he brings something to the genre that I haven't seen, and it's a lot of humor, it's a lot of heart, it's a lot of just the relationships with the characters, and I liked the focus on that. This is definitely a novel that has more heavy-hitting things, especially when it comes to kind of some of the backstories with the characters, but it doesn't, it's one of the few fantasy novels that I've read that didn't make me incredibly depressed, essentially. It's done in a, I don't want to say lighthearted way, but it's done in a very fluid way that as you're reading it, it doesn't bring you down. It makes you think, but it doesn't overwhelm you. And I really loved that because I struggle sometimes with the fantasy that I read, especially adult fantasy, which this is, that it bogs me down a lot and it does drive me nuts. And I did not experience that at all in this story. And like I said, the plot is interesting enough. It follows Rose has decided to take her troop, Fable, to go and actually kill a essentially like a dragon, and this dragon is like renowned. People don't actually believe it exists, but you know, a couple people do, and they have seen it, and she goes to actually kill it. And I really liked that that kind of story existed, because there is another essentially invasion by the army they invaded in the first book, and she chooses not to go and do that because she wants to do one last thing with her group, with Fable, and that's it, and they're done. And I really liked that, and I don't know why, because I didn't want it to be like another siege novel with that kind of thing happening. So it's really cool. But another thing that I gained from that I really like, especially when it comes to Nick's writing, is the fight scenes are stunning. Like, I have said this, I said this in my vlog that I did that came out on Monday that you guys are seeing this. I want this made into a movie. Like, I want this made into a show. I want to see this on some kind of big screen. Like, somebody get me in connection with HBO. Like, I need to see this happen. It is so good. And I feel like the fight scenes are done so well, and any kind of like physical interaction the characters have with the story is done really well. Like, you can tell either he did his research or he has a history of, you know, like physical combatant kind of stuff. So I really loved that. I think that oftentimes, more so recently, I kind of base my books when it comes to physical fighting on what I thought of Kings of the Wild, like the way the fight scenes are done in that and the way the fight scenes are done in this book. So when I read a book and the fight scenes are a little bit off or a little bit weird, I always go back to how I felt about this and use that as like my point A, and then see how other books kind of stack up against it. So it's really cool to have a book that kind of brings that to the table, to know that I have a book that I can tell something is so good that I can base other things off of it. So I really, really like that part of it as well. I didn't have any qualms with this book at all. I would say the only thing that I sort of had qualms with was at one point in time a little bit of the pacing, but it's not that noticeable at all. I think if you're just reading this for enjoyment, or even if you're reading it with a critical mind, I think a lot of people may oversee that. I think the reason that it really stuck with me, or kind of bugged me a little bit in this book, is purely because I was reading an incredibly slow book at the same time as this, and I actually had to set that book aside to finish this one because I was getting bogged down and kind of felt myself coming on a slump. So I still gave it 5 stars, because I can't tell if the pacing really bugged me or if it was because I was just kind of feeling that sort of way. So I did end up giving it 5 stars anyway. This is a series that I think a lot of people will enjoy. If you like great fight scenes, if you like great characters, if you like lesbian rep, because our main character Tam is a lesbian, I think you'll really like that. And I really like just the fantasy element of this. I like all the different types of magics. I like all the different characters. I just thought everybody was represented really well, and I think it was really fluid, and it was just done, I don't know how many times I can say this, it was done really well. Like, as a whole, I think that both of these books are just phenomenal, and if you've been wondering whether or not you should read them, you absolutely should. I would not sleep on it. I slept on it way too long, and I really, really regret it. I got Kings of the Wild for my birthday last year, and it's taken me this long to read it, and I think I read it like 4 months ago. So I wouldn't sleep on it. I promise you guys, it is worth it. It is absolutely 100% worth it. If you've read it, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it, if you read Kings of the Wild, or if you've even read Bloody Rose. I would be super interested in hearing what you guys thought about it. But that is it. That is what I thought of Bloody Rose and what I think of Nick's writing, and just me gushing essentially about him for 9 minutes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and leave down below, like I said, if you have read this and what you thought of it, or if you have an interest in reading it, kind of why. But I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! So Bloody Rose does take place further